Before there were supermarkets, before there were farms as we know them, before civilization had a name, there were vegetables, plants that fed the first cities, sustained the first empires, and traveled across oceans in the hands of explorers who understood that a seed was the most powerful thing you could carry. Some of the vegetables on this list are older than writing itself. Some fed pharaohs, some built armies, some saved entire populations from starvation, and some of them are sitting in your kitchen right now, carrying thousands of years of human history inside them, waiting to be noticed. Welcome to Flora. 1. Lentil. The lentil may be the oldest cultivated crop on Earth. Archaeological evidence places its domestication in the Fertile Crescent, the region spanning modern Syria, Turkey, and Iraq, at least 9,000 years ago. Some sites suggest earlier. It appears in ancient Egyptian tombs placed alongside the dead as food for the journey beyond. It is mentioned in the Bible. In Genesis, Esau trades his birthright for a bowl of lentil stew, suggesting the lentil was valuable enough to serve as a unit of negotiation. Small, flat, and requiring no soaking before cooking, the lentil was the perfect food for people in motion: armies, traders, nomads, pilgrims. It contains more protein per calorie than almost any other plant food. 9,000 years later, it is still one of the most widely consumed foods on the planet. Some things do not need to be improved, they only need to be remembered. 2. Garlic has been found in Egyptian tombs dating back 5,000 years. It was given to the workers who built the pyramids. Rations of garlic, recorded in hieroglyphics on the walls of Khufu's pyramid, listed alongside bread and beer as essential daily provisions. The Greek physician Hippocrates prescribed it for respiratory problems, fatigue, and digestive disorders, uses that modern research has since validated. Roman soldiers ate it before battle, believing it gave them strength and courage. In medieval Europe, it was hung above doorways to ward off plague and evil, a superstition born perhaps from the observation that people who consumed it regularly seemed to fall ill less frequently. Science has since identified allicin, the compound responsible for garlic's sharp flavor, as a powerful antimicrobial agent. 5,000 years of human intuition confirmed by a laboratory. The pyramid builders were not wrong. 3. Dried peas were found in a Swiss lake village dating to 3000 BCE. They have been discovered in Egyptian tombs, in the ruins of Troy, and in Bronze Age settlements across Europe and Asia, making the pea one of the most widely distributed ancient foods in human history. For most of that history, peas were eaten dried, boiled into thick porridge that sustained armies and peasants through winters when nothing else grew. The fresh green pea, the sweet, tender variety, familiar from any modern kitchen, is a relatively recent development, popularized in 17th century France, where eating petit pois fresh from the pod became a fashionable obsession at the court of Louis XIV. The Sun King's court fought over fresh peas. 5,000 years before that, lake villages in Switzerland were storing dried ones for winter. The same plant, the same seed, separated by millennia and the particular desires of whoever happened to be eating it. 4. Onion. The onion appears in ancient Egyptian art so frequently that historians believe it held symbolic as well as nutritional significance. Its concentric rings, one layer perfectly enclosing the next, were seen as a symbol of eternity, of life within life, of something that could be peeled indefinitely without ever reaching an empty center. Onions were found inside the mummy of Ramesses IV, placed in the eye sockets, perhaps because their strong scent was believed to restore the breath of life. They were consumed in ancient Mesopotamia, ancient India, and ancient China, making the onion one of the few vegetables with a documented history on nearly every inhabited continent simultaneously. Alexander the Great fed onions to his troops, believing they increased physical vigor. In In medieval Europe, onions were so valuable they were accepted as rent payment and given as wedding gifts. A vegetable so fundamental to human cooking that almost every cuisine on Earth across every era of recorded history . 5. Chickpea. Chickpeas have been feeding humans for at least 7,500 years. Carbonized remains have been found at archaeological sites in Turkey dating to 5450 BCE, and they appear in ancient texts from Mesopotamia, Egypt, Greece, and Rome, with a consistency that suggests they were never a luxury, but always a staple. Charlemagne, emperor of the Franks, ordered chickpeas grown on imperial estates in the 9th century CE. In ancient Rome, Marcus Tullius Cicero, one of history's greatest orators, took his family name from the Latin word for chickpea, cicer, suggesting an ancestor so associated with growing them that the vegetable became the family identity. Today, chickpeas are among the most consumed legumes on Earth, fundamental to cuisines from India to the Mediterranean to the Middle East. They have sustained humans across 7,500 years of war, famine, empire, and change, outlasting every civilization that ate them and continuing quietly into the next one. 6. Beetroot. The beet plant was first cultivated in the Mediterranean around 4,000 years ago, but initially only the leaves were eaten. The root was used medicinally. Ancient Greeks offered beet roots to Apollo at the Temple of Delphi. Placed on silver platters alongside turnips and radishes, the beet considered valuable enough for divine offering. Roman physicians prescribed beet juice for fever, constipation, and skin conditions. It was not until the 16th century in Europe that the root began to be eaten regularly as a food rather than a medicine. The deep purple-red color, etocyanin, that stains hands and cutting boards is the same pigment that signals to modern nutritional science a dense concentration of antioxidants, nitrates that improve cardiovascular function, and folate essential for cell growth. 4,000 years of medicinal use, 2 centuries of regular eating, and science, arriving last, confirming what ancient physicians already suspected, that this particular root contains something worth paying attention to. 7. Leek. The leek was the favored vegetable of the Emperor Nero, who consumed it in such quantities, believing it improved the clarity and power of his voice, that he earned the nickname Porphyragus, the leek eater. Before Nero, leeks appear in ancient Egyptian records as rations given to laborers. They are mentioned in the Bible in the Book of Numbers, where the Israelites in the desert recall with longing the leeks they ate in Egypt, suggesting the leek was common enough to be missed and flavorful enough to be mourned. The leek is the national symbol of Wales, worn on St. David's Day, a tradition traced to a 7th century battle where Welsh soldiers wore leeks in their helmets to distinguish themselves from Saxon enemies on the same field. A vegetable that identified a nation. That improved an emperor's voice. That was missed by people wandering a desert. The leek has earned its place in history through sheer persistence, present at almost every significant moment it was needed. 8. Radishes were cultivated in Egypt before the pyramids were built. Ancient records suggest they were among the wages paid to workers at Giza. Alongside onions and garlic, the 3 vegetables most associated with the labor that built one of humanity's greatest monuments. They spread from Egypt through Greece, where Theophrastus, the father of botany, wrote about them in detail in the 4th century BCE, and into Rome, where they were eaten before meals as appetite stimulants. In ancient China, radishes were used medicinally for digestion and respiratory conditions, a use documented in texts predating the Common Era. The Japanese daikon, a white radish that can grow to several pounds, has been cultivated in Japan for at least 1,300 years and remains central to Japanese cuisine today. The same plant domesticated independently in multiple civilizations simultaneously, each one discovering the same sharp, clean flavor and deciding it was worth keeping. The radish did not spread because one civilization taught another. It spread because humans, everywhere, recognized something good. 9. Turnip. The turnip fed Europe through its darkest winters for 2,000 years. It grew in cold soil when almost nothing else would. It stored through winter in root cellars. It could be eaten by humans, fed to livestock, and replanted from its own seed, making it one of the most self-sufficient crops in agricultural history. Ancient Greeks and Romans ate it regularly. Pliny the Elder ranked it among the most important vegetables of the Roman world. In medieval Europe, it was the primary food of the poor, boiled, mashed, stewed, present at nearly every table that could not afford meat. The introduction of the potato to Europe in the 16th century eventually displaced the turnip from its central role. Populations that had depended on the turnip for survival shifted to the new arrival. The turnip did not disappear. It simply stepped back, no longer essential but still present, still growing in cold soil the way it always had. Some vegetables outlast the civilizations that needed them most. The turnip is one of them. 10. Fava bean. The fava bean is one of the oldest plants ever deliberately cultivated by humans. Evidence of cultivation dates to at least 6000 BCE in the Middle East, with wild consumption likely predating that by thousands of years. It appears in the ruins of Troy. It was grown in ancient Rome, where it held a complicated cultural status, associated both with death and with voting. Romans used white and black fava beans as ballots, dropping them into urns to cast votes in assemblies. The philosopher Pythagoras famously forbade his followers from eating fava beans, a prohibition that has fascinated historians for centuries. Theories range from religious taboo to the practical observation that fava beans cause a serious reaction in people with a specific genetic enzyme deficiency, a condition now known as favism. Pythagoras may not have known the biochemistry, but he noticed the pattern. 8,000 years of cultivation, a philosopher's prohibition, a genetic disorder named after the bean itself. The fava bean carries more human history inside it than almost any other vegetable alive. Cucumber. The cucumber has been cultivated in India for at least 3,000 years, and possibly as many as 10,000, making it one of the earliest vegetables ever domesticated in South Asia. It appears in the Epic of Gilgamesh, one of the oldest written stories in human history, mentioned as a food of the ancient city of Uruk. It was grown in ancient Egypt, mentioned in the Bible, and cultivated throughout the Roman Empire, where Emperor Tiberius reportedly demanded cucumbers at his table every day of the year, requiring his gardeners to develop early greenhouse cultivation techniques to meet the demand year-round. The Roman method, growing cucumbers on wheeled carts that could be moved to follow the sun, may represent one of the earliest recorded examples of controlled environment agriculture. An emperor's appetite for cucumbers led to a horticultural innovation that prefigured the modern greenhouse by nearly 2,000 years. History moves forward in unexpected directions, sometimes through the specific hunger of a single person for a particular vegetable. 12. Spinach. Spinach originated in ancient Persia, modern Iran, where it was cultivated at least 2,000 years ago. It traveled to China in the 7th century CE, sent as a gift from the king of Nepal to the Tang dynasty emperor, recorded in Chinese texts as the Persian vegetable. It reached Europe through the Arab conquest of Spain in the 8th century, where it was initially cultivated in monastery gardens before spreading into broader use. Catherine de' Medici, the Italian noblewoman who became Queen of France in the 16th century, was reportedly so fond of spinach that she insisted it be served at every meal. Dishes prepared with spinach are still called Florentine in classical French cuisine, a reference to Catherine's Florentine origins and her particular insistence on the vegetable, a Persian plant, a Nepalese diplomatic gift, an Arab agricultural introduction, an Italian queen's obsession. The spinach on a plate today has traveled further and passed through more hands than most things in any kitchen. Celery. Wild celery was used medicinally in ancient Egypt and China long before it was eaten as food. It was found in the tomb of Tutankhamun, placed among the funerary offerings, suggesting it held ritual or medicinal significance beyond simple nutrition. Ancient Greeks used celery leaves to make garlands for athletic victors and placed them on the graves of the dead, a plant associated simultaneously with achievement and mourning. The celery familiar from modern kitchens, large, pale, mild-flavored stalks, is a relatively recent development, cultivated in Italy in the 17th century through selective breeding that reduced the bitterness of the wild plant. Before that, for thousands of years, celery was valued primarily for its seeds, used as a spice and medicine, and its leaves, which were stronger and more bitter than anything sold today. The vegetable we eat is a cultivated softening of something originally too sharp for regular consumption. 3,000 years of gradual adjustment. Breeders in each generation making it slightly milder, slightly larger, slightly more accessible, until it became the familiar thing that sits, largely unnoticed, in the refrigerator. Kale. Kale is among the oldest members of the cabbage family. Cultivated in Europe for at least 2,000 years, possibly longer. In ancient Rome, it was one of the most widely eaten vegetables across all social classes, present at the tables of senators and slaves with equal frequency. During the Middle Ages, kale was among the most important winter vegetables in Europe, cold hardy, nutritious, and capable of surviving frosts that killed more delicate crops. During World War II, the British government promoted kale cultivation extensively through the Dig for Victory campaign, its cold resistance and high nutritional density making it ideal for a population facing food rationing. Then, for several decades in the late 20th century, kale nearly disappeared from Western kitchens, considered old-fashioned, associated with poverty, largely forgotten. Its return in the early 21st century as a nutritional superfood, celebrated on menus and in health publications, brought a 2,000-year-old vegetable back to tables that had abandoned it barely a generation earlier. History does not always move forward in a straight line. Sometimes a vegetable that fed Roman senators and wartime Britain simply waits, quietly, in cold soil, for the rest of the world to remember why it mattered. 15. Cabbage has been cultivated for at least 4,000 years and has fed more people through more winters than almost any other vegetable in history. Ancient Greeks and Romans ate it regularly. Cato the Elder, the Roman statesman, wrote extensively about cabbage's medicinal properties, recommending it for everything from hangovers to wounds. Cabbage has been cultivated for at least 4,000 years and has fed more people through more winters than almost any other vegetable in history. Ancient Greeks and Romans ate it regularly. Cato the Elder, the Roman statesman, wrote extensively about cabbage's medicinal properties, recommending it for everything from hangovers to wounds. In Korea, the fermentation of cabbage into kimchi has been practiced for at least 2,000 years, a preservation technique that not only extended the vegetable's usefulness through winter, but also produced beneficial probiotic compounds that science is still studying. Sauerkraut, fermented cabbage, was carried on long sea voyages by Captain James Cook in the 18th century, successfully preventing scurvy among his crew through its high vitamin C content at a time when the relationship between diet and disease was not yet scientifically understood. Cook knew it worked before anyone could explain why. A vegetable fermented for preservation, a disease prevented by accident, a scientific understanding that arrived centuries after the solution was already in use. The cabbage has been quietly correct about things for a very long time. (16) Carrot. The first carrots eaten by humans were not orange. Wild carrots, and the earliest cultivated varieties in Afghanistan, where domestication began around 3,000 years ago, were purple, white, and yellow. Purple carrots traveled west through Persia and into the Arab world. They arrived in Europe in the 10th century, still purple. The orange carrot appeared in the Netherlands in the 17th century, bred, according to popular legend, by Dutch growers who developed it in honor of William of Orange, the Dutch royal house. Whether the story is entirely accurate or not, the orange carrot spread from the Netherlands across Europe and eventually the world with remarkable speed, replacing purple varieties so completely that most people today do not know orange was ever an addition rather than the original. A vegetable domesticated in Afghanistan, traveled through Persia, arrived in Europe purple, left the Netherlands orange. The carrot on any plate today completed a 3,000-year journey to get there, and it changed color somewhere along the way. (17) Artichoke. The artichoke was cultivated in ancient Greece and Rome, where it was considered a luxury food available primarily to the wealthy and served at elaborate banquets. Ancient Roman texts record artichokes being preserved in brine and vinegar for transport, one of the earliest documented examples of vegetable preservation for trade. In the 15th century, Catherine de' Medici, appearing again in this history, brought artichokes from Florence to France when she became queen, where they were initially considered scandalous. Contemporary accounts suggest that women eating artichokes in public was considered improper, the vegetable associated with aphrodisiac properties that made its public consumption by women a subject of commentary. Henry VIII of England reportedly enjoyed them greatly. The artichoke is a flower bud eaten before it blooms at the moment between potential and fulfillment. In ancient Rome, that moment was worth preserving and transporting across an empire. 2,000 years later, it still requires patience to eat, petal by petal, working toward the heart at the center. Some things have always been worth the effort. (18) Asparagus. Asparagus has been eaten for at least 2,500 years, depicted in ancient Egyptian friezes, cultivated in ancient Greece, and grown with particular enthusiasm in ancient Rome. The Roman cookbook Apicius, one of the oldest surviving recipe collections in the world, contains recipes for asparagus that would not look out of place in a modern restaurant. Julius Caesar reportedly ate it with melted butter. The Roman Emperor Augustus was so fond of asparagus that he created a special fleet of ships, called the Asparagus Fleet, dedicated to transporting it quickly across the empire and storing it in the Alps for year-round consumption. He also coined a phrase that became a Roman expression for speed: faster than you can cook asparagus. An emperor built a naval fleet for a vegetable, created an idiom around its cooking time. And the asparagus, 2,500 years later, is still eaten in spring, still appearing for a brief season, still requiring attention and timing to get right. Some things survive not because they are essential, but because they are, in the right moment, irreplaceable. (19) Bitter melon. Bitter melon has been cultivated in South and Southeast Asia for at least 600 years and consumed in wild form for considerably longer. It is one of the few vegetables that retains its bitterness throughout cultivation, rather than being selectively bred towards sweetness or mildness, a bitterness so pronounced that first-time consumers often find it genuinely difficult to eat. That bitterness is the point. In Ayurvedic medicine, the traditional Indian system of healing with roots extending back 3,000 years, bitter melon has been used to regulate blood sugar, treat skin conditions, and support digestive health. Modern clinical research has identified compounds in bitter melon, including charantin and polypeptide P, that demonstrate measurable effects on blood glucose levels, with ongoing studies examining their potential in diabetes management. A vegetable too bitter for casual eating, used medicinally for 3,000 years, now the subject of pharmaceutical research. The bitter melon never tried to make itself more approachable, it simply offered what it had, and waited for the world to understand why that was valuable. Wheatgrass/Emmer wheat. We end not with a vegetable in the modern sense, but with the plant that made civilization possible. Emmer wheat, one of the first domesticated grains, was cultivated in the fertile crescent, beginning approximately 10,000 years ago. Before Emmer wheat, humans moved. They followed animals, gathered what grew, and consumed what they found. After Emmer wheat, humans stayed. The ability to plant, tend, harvest, and store grain in quantities large enough to sustain a community through seasons when nothing else was growing created the conditions for everything that followed. Permanent settlements, specialization of labor, writing, trade, governance, cities. Emmer wheat appears in ancient Egyptian paintings, in Mesopotamian tablets, in the ruins of the earliest human settlements ever excavated. It fed the people who invented the wheel, who built the first temples, who wrote the first laws, who told the first stories that were written down and survived. Every civilization that has ever existed was built, in part, on the back of a grass plant domesticated by people whose names we will never know, in a region that no longer exists in the form it once had. They planted something. We are still eating it. Every vegetable on this list began as a wild plant that a human being thousands of years ago decided was worth keeping, worth planting again, worth improving and passing forward. The food on your plate today is the result of 10,000 years of human attention, patience, and memory carried forward across generations by people who understood that a seed is a gift you give to someone you will never meet. Thank you for eating through history with us today. This is Flora Fana.